Finally, after all this time, I get to review one of my new favorite games of all time, Transistor. I'm sorry I've kept everyone waiting for the review, but I had so much other stuff that I got sidetracked. So sorry about that. Anyway, indie games are usually the best games on the market nowadays, but unfortunately, they're typically only something I hear of via word of mouth, or by pure happenstance, Sony or Nintendo decide to include indie titles in their state of plays / Nintendo Directs. So a lot of these masterpieces slip right past me until like years later. Case in point, Transistor. Transistor straight up is one of the greatest games of the 2010s, and the way I found it was kind of interesting. A Plunderphonics artist by the name Little Tommy J remixed the game, and I found it absolutely beautiful. I was intrigued by the game, but not enough to want to purchase the game for myself. A few years later, I found out that my good friend Quantum Chill's favorite game was this, and I totally get why. So hey, without further ado, let's get on with the review. Hey, that rhymed.
I'm so sorry, Red. They took your voice.
Transistor is an action strategy indie game developed by Supergiant Games, available on every major home console excluding the Xbox consoles, PC, Mac, Steam Deck, Linux, iOS, and surprisingly the Apple TV. While you may not know the game itself, you may know the developers, Supergiant Games, the people behind Hades, the game that took home the gold at the 2020 Game Awards, so they know their stuff.
We're going back there. We've met these things. They do not have a sense of humor.
This is the most complex game story I've ever had to overview, so I may get some facts wrong. Transistor takes place in the city of Cloudbank, a gorgeous futuristic city implied to be set in some sort of computer that can be altered to the citizens' liking. The Camerata, who are basically the secret government of Cloudbank, are ticked off with the constant stream of new attractions being built for the city, and so they start regulating the city with an iron fist and shaping the city in their own image. They do this by going after entertainers. They use something called the Transistor to absorb influential individuals in hopes of creating constant new and interesting concepts for the city. All went well until they set their scope on the songstress Red, the main character who you play throughout the game. They throw the titular Transistor at her, but it misses and hits her husband? Boyfriend? Random guy that has a crush on her? The game never really explains. Anyway, this man, who I'll just refer to as the man, is a total unknown and is never given a name. He sticks with you throughout the entirety of the game as he is the one trapped inside the Transistor. Throughout the game, you learn more about the city, the Camerata, and you form a relationship with the man. The game has themes of totalitarianism as expressed with the Camerata, and individuality as expressed by you, the player, as you're one of the few things that isn't a robot. The theme of individuality also carries through in the gameplay department, more on that in a bit. Overall, I'd say the story is pretty solid. At its core, it's basically a journey story between you and your boyfriend, but there's a lot more deep themes here, and that's what I like. Even if it can be a little hard to follow at points. I'm gonna come out and say it. This is one of the best looking video games of all time. If you remove the HUD, any screenshot from the game could be considered a painting. It's honestly that beautiful. The way the light shines down on the city streets, the watercolor backgrounds, even the loading screens are dope. One thing to note about this game, as you can tell by the footage, is it's isometric, which never really caused too big of an issue for me, but there was this one part of the game where I thought the game was bugged and I couldn't get off the elevator, even though the solution was right there and it was just moved down. So, oops. I didn't get any footage of that, but you'll just have to take my word for it. The soundtrack is easily one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. It's this outlandish drum and bass sound, and it suits the vibe of the game really well. My favorite track in the game is the final boss Royce's theme. It sounds like it could have been made for, like, Ape Escape. Take a listen for yourself. I'm not going to play the full song, but just know that it's really, really good. Some of the tracks even have vocals in it, sung by Ashley Barrett, and they're just phenomenal. In non-combat scenarios, you can even make Red hum to the songs, which is really great. Overall, the presentation is pretty freaking fantastic. Now on to the gameplay.
Who gets to go first? How about me?
Transistor has some of the most insane action RPG gameplay I have ever seen. It's so unique and different from everything else out on the market, and it all comes down to one thing: the Transistor itself. This is where the individuality theme within the gameplay comes in. The Transistor is described in-game as a paintbrush, and while that might be true story-wise, gameplay-wise, it's more like a highly customizable Swiss Army knife. You see, the Transistor only works if you attach functions to it. These functions are crash, breach, bounce, call, flood, get, load, tap, ping, help, mask, spark, purge, jaunt, and void. You have 4 main slots for these functions, and they all have different uses. For instance, crash is like a very powerful but slow-moving sword slam that stuns enemies for a short period. Ping is like if you turn the Transistor into a cowboy repeater. And bounce shoots a deadly bouncing projectile that goes all over the place. You also have more defensive abilities, such as Mask, which makes you invisible for a short amount of time, and Jaunt, which is useful for getting out of the way in a pinch. Now, as I said, you only have 4 slots for these abilities, at least as primary abilities, because you can combine one of your functions and add on 2 secondary functions, which allows you to play the game how you see fit. For instance, Crash is a great ability on its own, but it takes a little bit to actually hit the ground and leaves you to be a sitting duck for about 1.5 seconds. Well, you combine Crash with Ping to create a fast-acting Crash, and then combine that with Breach to give it some distance, and there you go. Or let's say you're crowded by a group of robots and need to make a quick getaway. Well, you can equip Jaunt with Mask so you become invisible for a brief period of time, and throw in Tap to restore a little bit of health while you make a quick getaway, or instead of Tap, use Help to create shadow clones of yourself to confuse enemies, and oh my god, dude. But I haven't even explained the most powerful ability in the game: Turn. Turn is the only function equipped at all times, and what it does is it allows the players to turn into Fry from Futurama from that one episode where he drinks a shit ton of coffee. All the enemies freeze, and you can plan out your next move without getting destroyed. However, this comes at a cost. At the top of the screen, there's a bar that indicates how much turn you have left, and different abilities take different amounts of your turn away. Not only that, but after the turn ends, you cannot attack at all until the bar recharges. So unless you're facing a really powerful enemy, it's best to use turn as little as possible. Turn can also be outfitted with secondary slots. So if you absolutely need to get your power back after a turn, you can outfit yourself with Ping or Jaunt so that you're not as much of a sitting duck while waiting for you to use your abilities. Now, I'm making Red sound like she's an absolute tank here, but in reality, she's much more of a glass cannon. Even at full health, she goes down like the Titanic, and regaining health is pretty slow, even with the tap ability. You don't die after you lose all your HP, as you have 4 health bars, and only when the last health bar depletes do you actually get sent back to the last checkpoint. But you do lose one of your functions until a certain checkpoint, which makes the combat harder. Losing a function isn't the end of the world, however. Yes, you may have lost one of your abilities along with the hypothetical secondary abilities that you have attached to it, but this just opens the door for more experimentation when it comes to the functions. Experimenting in this game feels like that one scene in Ratatouille where Remy experiences nirvana by combining the flavors of a strawberry and the flavors of a block of cheese. It's honestly what makes the game so fun and replayable, because you may find new flavors that you didn't expect to love so much. Not to mention that this game has a Ratchet and Clank type challenge mode where you can keep all of your abilities, but enemies become far tougher, so you have to experiment even more. In terms of bosses, I'm sad to report that Transistor only has 3, but I'm glad to report that they're all solid. Sybil, despite being the first boss, gave me a decent challenge and I had to think on my feet a lot. Not only that, but Sybil was the one who trapped the man inside the transistor at the beginning of the game. Well, okay, she ordered Royce to do it, but still. So, you have a decent reason to actually kick her ass. Then we have the Spine, which is this huge, out-of-control robot monster that stalks you a bit before having this epic David and Goliath style battle, and it's just so amazing. Royce is the one behind the Camerata and the process, and he's the best boss of the game, easily. No, he doesn't have the spectacle of the Spine, but he's interesting in the way that he's the most like you from a gameplay perspective. He uses a transistor and the same functions you do, including turn, so you have to think on your feet more than any previous encounter. In terms of side content, Transistor includes these cool little challenges. Sometimes you must get a super high combo, sometimes you're stuck in a room with a bunch of enemies, with your abilities are more limited, and you must come up with the best strategy for dealing with your foes with such a limited functions, which is a cool and unique way to play the game, and completing these challenges lets you listen to some of the game's awesome tunes on the jukebox. In conclusion, the gameplay is super fun, and super addictive. I never wanted to put down my controller while playing the game.
You know what you have to do. What have we got to lose?
The game ends with Royce beaten and you with the opportunity to restore Cloudbank. You return to the place you were at the start of the game with your boyfriend's lifeless body still on the curb. Your boyfriend's conscience in the transistor urging you to leave his old body behind and restore the city. Instead, you take the transistor and you thrust it into your chest.
Red. Don't you do it. Don't you dare. Don't do this. Please. If you do this, Red, please don't. Wait. Red. 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 Did you do it? No, Red, no.
I love this ending. It's a legitimately great twist, even if it destroys the possibility for a sequel. We assume Red wants to save Cloudbank because it's our desire, but was it ever Red's? You legitimately don't know because she doesn't talk throughout the game, so you don't know what her desires are. But it turns out she just wanted to spend the rest of her life with the man who saved her life. It's a fantastic subversion of expectations. Fuck, I can't talk. I love this ending so much. It's legitimately one of the greatest video game endings of all time. Just, so good.
Everyone always.
Transistor is a fantastic buy for anyone, and I mean anyone. It's ridiculously cheap, only being $20, although I got it for like $6 on sale. The gameplay is exquisite, the music is phenomenal, the graphics are incredible, the story moves you, and the game is basically flawless, aside from the fact that it's a little on the short side, and the fact that when the game ends, it leaves you wanting more, even if that's impossible. But hey, that's not really a slight against the game, meaning I only have one real issue with the game. And it's the thing that unfortunately keeps the game from getting an A++. But I think the grade I'm about to give this game is pretty fantastic. Transistor gets an A+ with the title of Masterpiece. Thanks so much for watching my video. I'm sorry it took so long, but it's here, and that's what's important. Stay tuned for my review of KO2, and if you liked my vid, why not subscribe and tap the bell?